The Constitution imposes no requirement that a procedural resolution such as H-Res 660 be voted on by the House. Claiming otherwise is but a fabrication meant to distract from the mountain of growing evidence that demonstrates this president abused his power for personal benefit. However, while not necessary, this resolution provides for impartial procedures similar to those used during the past impeachment proceedings. Because Republicans requested a formal procedural vote, I expect nothing less than their full support for H-Red 660. Anything less would be shameful. As chairwoman of the Financial Services Committee, we've been conducting credible investigations into the conduct of this administration, and this work will continue in the manner outlined by H-Red 660. I look forward to Democrats and Republicans alike prioritizing country over party, as we swore an oath to do, voting in favor of H-Red 660.
Gentleman from Massachusetts. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, Mr. Swalwell.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
I would like you to do us a favor, though. President Trump said those 10 words on July 25 to Ukraine's president before asking the Ukrainian president to investigate a potential political opponent. For the past month, the Intelligence Committee has led an investigation into what happened around that phone call. In this early investigative stage, we have heard powerful corroborating evidence that President Trump led an extortion shakedown scheme over the Ukrainians, leveraging $391 million of taxpayer dollars to have a foreign power assist him in his upcoming campaign. Just as powerful as the evidence we heard is the courage of the people who have come forward to provide it, defying lawless White House orders to obstruct and instead adhering to lawful congressional subpoenas. The evidence, however, is not a conclusion. At this stage, we must move now to a public process with due process protections for the president to secure and test that evidence. When our founders designed the Constitution, they considered a lawless president and how to hold that person accountable. James Madison said the Constitution needed a provision for defending the community against lawlessness.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Now we must solemnly
Gentleman's
embark
time's
upon this journey.
expired.
I yield back.
Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to inquire from my friend if he has additional speakers.
We do. I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Colorado.
The gentleman was.
In that case, Madam Speaker, I'll reserve my time. Thank you.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Happy to yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Neguse.
Gentleman's recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, today is a serious and solemn day for our country. The House's impeachment inquiry has exposed the truth and uncovered significant evidence that the president abused his power. To honor the oath to defend the Constitution that each of us took, we must move forward with this impeachment inquiry. For as Thomas Jefferson once said hundreds of years ago, a sacred respect for the constitutional law is the vital principle, the sustaining energy of a free government. Let us honor the Constitution and defend it today by voting yes on this resolution.
Time's expired. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Madam Speaker, I continue to reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, I'm happy to yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Boyle.
Gentleman's recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, I did not come here to launch an impeachment process. However, the facts demand it. A republic, if you can keep it. What we decide today will say more about us than it says about the conduct of the president. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I continue to reserve my
Gentleman
time.
reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I yield, Madam Speaker, I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Cicilline.
Gentleman's recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, on opening day, we take an oath of office. We take an oath not to a king, not to a president, but to protect and defend the Constitution. It is our solemn duty. And in fact, this resolution sets forth the procedures for the next phase of our impeachment inquiry. We know substantial evidence has been presented that the president abused his power undermine our national security, and undermine the integrity of our elections, we are duty bound to proceed. It is a sad day, but not because Congress has the courage to stand up for our democracy, but because the president's conduct has forced this action. I urge my colleagues to approve
Gentleman's
this
time's
resolution.
expired. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I continue to reserve my
Gentleman
time.
reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I'm prepared to close for our side, so I
Gentleman's
will
prepared
yield
to
to the gentleman.
close. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Madam Speaker, if I yield myself such times I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if we defeat the previous question, I will amend the resolution to ensure transparency for the American people. My amendment will do three very simple things. First, it will require the chairman of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence to publicly release the transcripts of all depositions and interviews in a timely manner to allow any necessary redactions to protect classified or sensitive information. My colleagues on the other side have been operating in secret and behind closed doors. They've been violating standing House rules by preventing member access to documents, let alone sharing anything with the people that elected them to serve. Second, my amendment requires the Intel chairman to transfer all records or materials, including exculpatory records or materials, to the Judiciary Committee. The chairman's instructed to again make the necessary redactions to protect any classified or sensitive information. In contrast, the Democratic majority's resolution lets the chairman choose what information he will share. And finally, my amendment requires the Intelligence Committee's records and reports, as well as any material received from any other committee involved, be made available at least 72 hours prior to the Judiciary Committee considering any articles of impeachment or other recommendations. The resolution before us today does absolutely nothing to guarantee that the American people will see this vital information. The procedures my Democratic colleagues set up for this impeachment inquiry are fundamentally unfair and fundamentally partisan. They reject due process, they reject minority rights, and they reject adequate public disclosure. The American people will not respect the process. That's not fair, Madam Speaker. I urge the House to reject this measure, and I urge the House to insist on bipartisan procedures that respect the rights of the minority and the right of due process. With that, Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the distinguished Republican leader, Mr. McCarthy of California.
Gentleman's recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Madam Speaker, elections have consequences. Our fellow Americans use their vote to choose who will work for them. So I ask you all a simple question, especially to my colleagues. Is that what is happening here today? Are we gathered in these final moments before we depart for a week to fund our government, to pay our troops? Are we gathered today to approve a new trade deal? Or are we gathered to debate the critical national security issues regarding China or Iran? Well, that answer would be unanimously no. We are not working for the American people. Those items would resemble the achievements of a productive Congress, a Congress that truly works for the people. But you know what this Congress counts? This Congress records is more subpoenas than laws. That's the legacy. It is not just devoid of solutions for the American people. It is now abusing its power to discredit democracy. By using secret interviews and selective leaks to portray the president's legitimate actions as an impeachable offense. Democrats are continuing their permanent campaign to undermine his legitimacy. For the last 3 years, they have predetermined the president's guilt. They have never accepted the voters' choice to make him president. So for 37 days and counting, they have run an unprecedented, undemocratic, and unfair investigation. This resolution today only makes it worse. I've heard members on the other side say they promise rights to the president, but only if he does what they want. That's the equivalent of saying in the First Amendment, you have the right to the freedom of speech, but you can only say the words I agree with. That's what you call due process. The amendment offered by my colleague, Mr. Cole, would help correct some of the transparency concerns we have witnessed over the last few weeks. But today is more than the fairness of an impeachment process. It is about the integrity of our electoral process. Democrats are trying to impeach the president because they are scared they cannot defeat him at the ballot box. That's not my words. That's the words of my colleagues from the other side of the aisle that has offered impeachment 3 different times. This impeachment is not only an attempt to undo the last election, it is an attempt to influence the next one as well. This is not what Democrats promised when they entered the majority 11 months ago. In this chamber, we heard from our speaker while we all sat here. We heard what the speaker said when she talked about words of optimism and cooperation. It was said we would work together to make America stronger, more secure, and more prosperous. We were told our mission was to return the power to the people. In fact, our new colleagues on the other side of the aisle were sent to Washington with a mandate to do just that. So what's happening? Nothing like that today. Not long ago, Democrats recognized that a partisan impeachment would put politics over people and harm our nation. That exact same speaker that talked about cooperation, that talked about and promised the American people that they would be different. They would be different if you trusted you with the majority. You have failed in that promise. That speaker said impeachment is so divisive to the country that unless there's something so compelling and overwhelming and bipartisan, the word of bipartisan, I do not think we should go down that path because it divides the country. What has changed since those words have been spoken? Alexander Hamilton wrote, "There will always be the greatest danger that the decision to use the impeachment power would be driven by partisan animosity instead of real demonstrations of innocence or guilt. This sham impeachment by Democrats have proven Hamilton right and portrays the speaker's own words. I know emotions are high. I know members would even run for positions of chair simply on the fact that they would be a better chair for impeachment right after the election. But when we all stood that day and listened to the words of the speaker of cooperation, we all raised our hand to uphold the Constitution. Tomorrow is November 1st. We're 1 year away from an election, not just for this House, but for the highest office of presidency. Why do you not trust the people? Why do you not allow the people to have a voice? Why in a process that America lends their voice to all of us, that you deny us to speak for them? Is animosity risen that high? Is Hamilton proven correct again? There is a moment and time that you should rise to the occasion. This is that moment. This is the moment that history will write. History will ask you when you cast this vote, when you cast a vote to justify something that has gone on behind closed doors, I want you to ask the historian and answer the question, what do you know that happened there? Have you read anything that took place that you just justified? What do you believe the definition of due process is? What do you think the First Amendment is? Do you have the right to have a voice, or only the words that you agree with? You may get elected in a primary, but in a general election, you're elected to represent the people of America, not to deny their voice. This House is so much better than what is transforming today. I believe everyone who runs for this office runs to solve a problem. But when you go back to the American public with the achievement of more subpoenas than laws, that is not why you ran. That is not why we are here. And that's why I agree with my colleague, Mr. Cole, that believes in the power of the people, people before politics, that we believe and know we can do better, that we believe the Speaker when she said about cooperation. We believed her when she said if you trusted them with the majority, they would be different. I guess
The remarks to the chair. The gentleman from Oklahoma has 1 minute remaining.
With that, Madam Speaker, I will yield back the balance of my
Gentleman
time.
yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I yield myself the balance of the time.
Gentleman's recognized.
Madam Speaker, let me assure the distinguished minority leader that this Democratic majority can legislate and also fulfill our constitutional responsibilities to hold this president to account, because it is our job. We took an oath to do that. And in terms of our legislative accomplishments, they're second to none. When you were in the majority, you shut the government down. Today, the Education and Labor Committee just reported out the higher ed bill. We passed a bill to deal with gun violence. We passed the DREAM Act. We raised the minimum wage. We're working on a bill to lower prescription drugs. We passed a bill to protect our elections so Russia doesn't interfere in our elections ever again. So, Madam Speaker, I want to say to my colleagues that I am proud of the process we are following here today that brought us this resolution. You know, Madam Speaker, past Congresses under the impeachments of President Nixon and Clinton found it prudent to have a resolution in place laying out the path forward. And that is what we are doing here today. This resolution before us today is based on precedent. It includes protections for President Trump. The President's counsel is given the right to ask questions when the evidence is presented. The rules here expressly provide his counsel the chance to be invited to offer a concluding presentation. Neither of these things were guaranteed to President Nixon and President Clinton. And it lays out a clear path forward so that the American people know what to expect going forward. Madam Speaker, the obstruction from this White House is unprecedented. It is stunning. We don't know whether President Trump will be impeached, but the allegations are as serious as it gets, endangering national security for political gain. Madam Speaker, history is testing us, and I worry, based on what we have heard from the other side today, that some may be failing that test. There are no kings and queens in America. That is what separates this country from so many other nations. No one is above the law. Let me repeat that. No one is above the law. I urge my colleagues to support this resolution. I yield back my time for discussion of the resolution.
Question now occurs on ordering the question on the resolution. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Madam
Gentleman
Speaker,
from Oklahoma.
on that, I would request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. If a sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, the chair will reduce to 5 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote on the question of adoption of the resolution. The chair emphasizes that this will be a 15-minute vote.
Już zostało tylko 7 głosujących, ale jak sami widzicie, już właściwie jest przesądzone. To nie było głosowanie nad impeachmentem, tak zwanym Donalda Trumpa, tylko nad rozpoczęciem procesu, który jeszcze będzie miał sporo takich faz. Natomiast no, nie ma co ukrywać, jest to rzeczywiście duży krok do odsunięcia prezydenta Trumpa od władzy. Widać, że demokraci są tutaj zdesperowani wyborami przyszłorocznymi, prezydenckimi, więc chwytają się wszystkiego, co by można było, żeby pokonać Donalda Trumpa, łącznie właśnie z tą procedurą impeachmentu. Zobaczymy, jak to się dalej potoczy. Na pewno na kanale z punktu widzenia migranta możecie liczyć tutaj na wieści z Ameryki. A na razie dzięki za oglądanie. Trzymajcie się. Cześć.